really figure out what part of your body needs to be in what position, really, like my hands are doing right now. I like to look at a little bit of both. Obviously, everybody likes to look at pictures of themselves, but if you do have someone that can take several photographs of you as you play, and you can really look through those sequences, that's where you're going to really be able to dissect the meat. So, speaking of the meat, let's get into it. We're going to go over the diving and sliding stuff. So you're going to see some good, some bad, some ugly, and I'm going to go ahead and do a handful of everything here. Now, this is your classic lateral slide right here, going into a Dorito. This is where you're going to use that lateral slide the most. Now, one thing that I always urge to a lot of players are your several different points of contact, the 3 points of contact. You may have heard me say that several different times in clinics or in explanations, but you see there's one here is my hand, 2 here is that knee, and then the 3rd point of contact is this leg, which you'll see sweeps around, okay? And notice where the weight displacement is, okay? I am coming down. It looks like my knee is going to hit first right here, okay? But what ends up happening is I shift that body weight and I put the majority of my weight here on my hip, okay? Something that a lot of players get very, I want to say, lazy with is when you play on turf, a lot of you guys can slide just on your knee. But what happens is when you guys play on natural terrain, like you see here, and like you see at pretty much every major event around the nation, is that if you put the majority of your weight directly driving into this knee, you're going to stick, stop, and then you're going to fall over. So I think it's very important to put a lot of that weight down on your hip. The 3rd point of contact being my back foot that I'm sliding across the turf. And this is something that's important for a lot of you guys who are struggling with getting this specific skill set down. If you look at where my body is pointed here, all right, I'll use a different color. Okay, so I'm running in this direction, right? This is the direction that I'm moving in, but I want to face where the bad guys are, which are down here, okay? So think of a baseball swing, swinging a baseball bat rather, or a golf swing where you really need to pivot your body around. You can see how my body is beginning to rotate in this direction, all right? Finally, here I am. My hips are now pointed this way, okay? I'm coming up onto, this is the knee and leg that would hit down first, and this was my lead leg that was behind me. So as I'm running out to, I was running out to my left, so my left leg goes down right here, okay? And my right leg, right hand swing up, and then my body's squared to my opponents, as you can see where they are down there. So again, I was running in this direction here. Then that was the first motion. The second motion would have been that twist to get myself, my body momentum from one direction into the other. And then I have my hips, my body, my eyes, everything facing that direction now. Okay, so again, let's look at that. Sorry for using different colors here. The 3 points of contact that we were looking at, this one right here is 1. Okay, knee goes down, the hand goes down. Now, as far as if I were to give you guys an idea of how much weight I'm putting on each area, I put about 75-80% of my weight here on this leg, okay? About 5 to 10% right here, and then as this leg swings across, it'll gather up the remaining 5, 10, or 15% of my weight. Now, what I do want to point out is if you guys are playing in slick terrain or if you guys stick or fall, you don't want to fall back on your wrist. You want to use your elbow, and you brace yourself by coming down on your elbow right there. Again, here I come. My body swings around 90 degrees here, and I am coming up into, oh, skip this slide here. But again, this is the same idea, and my body's pointed in the direction that I want to be in, okay? That's a really important little slide right there. I'm going to probably come back to this one. Let's see here. We've got, I actually really like this one. I'm gonna pull up Ollie Ruffalo here, Team USA candidate. Well, I believe he made the team both years. He's been in the BKI program. He's also been to a lot of my clinics in the past, so I expect him to know and execute all this stuff really well. And what I want to point out, what he does really, really well. So this is kind of like a lateral slide to a dive. He does a little hybrid here. Ollie's also pretty tall, but what I want to point out, something that I actually did not do, and this is why I like looking. So one thing that I'm not doing right here until I get around to it is my eyes should be downfield. Okay, I should be looking out at my opponents right here. I know I'm glancing at where I want to slide, so I'm gonna let myself slide a little bit here. But I love what Ollie's doing in this is as he's sliding, his eyes are up. Okay, he's always looking downfield. See how his tank is, like I mentioned before, his tank is pretty much locked into his elbow right here, and his gun is protected. Something that I always reiterate, guys, especially when we're diving, and we're going to see this in the next couple of slides, protecting your equipment is incredibly important. So his gun is close to his body. His loader is tucked in. Remember, we were pointing out a couple things in the movement section before, a couple of those lateral slides where the tank and the bottle were actually out of the body, where Brandon and Rosie had their guns a little bit wider than they should have. So eyes are up. Most of that weight here on this bottom hip. He's going to swing this leg around to get a little bit of tension here on the ground, or traction rather. And you're going to see the next slide here. You can see he kind of comes up and his body swings. And what he does here is, because he's really trying to go forward right now. So he slid, I'm assuming, around this corner. And now he's going to propel himself forward. So again, he's a pretty big kid, but he's able to get this leg all the way up underneath him. And then that will propel him forward into what he's going to do is a little bit of a head first dive. So I really like this move. He comes into a lateral slide, and then as he gets to that point where he's going to go forward, he propels himself forward with his back foot. Controlling his body here with this outside hand. Great. Propels himself forward. And you can see how he's using his body mechanics that we talked about in both of the last two lessons, how that arm comes back up and he's going to swing it forward, I'm assuming. Yeah, so he comes up, cocks that arm back, and he's going to swing it forward here as he goes down. But do you notice how his eyes are always up, looking downfield? It's not a very good arrow. His eyes are always up, looking downfield. The only thing here that I would say is that he's pretty tall, okay? I would try looking at this next couple of slides. This is like a picture perfect little dive here. And the reason he is a little high right here for two reasons. One, he does have this little brick, and he's still lower than this cake is right here. But he needs to get momentum to go forward, but because he's not running into a dive, he's sliding out and then projecting himself forward. So he's getting a lot of pressure off of these back feet, getting a lot of momentum built off this back two feet to really propel himself forward. But his butt's a little high, but I'm gonna let him slide on this one. But see here again how this bottle and tank are controlled. The gun is controlled. The barrel tip is pointed up, and he's going to slightly. This is important part right here. You're gonna see he has the tank parallel with the ground here, and the reg parallel with the ground here. Okay, or I guess that would be his ASA. But what happens is, as he transitions into this dive, you can see how he twists it, and then he brings his wrist in right here. So he's gonna land on his elbow and his forearm. So see how that transition right there. And this is something really important to take away. And when you guys are dissecting yourselves, and when you play, you want to look at little aspects like this that are really going to show where and how you're right or wrong, right? So maybe if he had smashed his bottle and his barrel went into the dirt, then he could look back on this and say, oh, well, what exactly happened? Why is that? Again, barrel tips up. Do you notice how his eyes never left where his opponents are? He's always constantly scanning the field. And that's another thing that I always reiterate, and I always emphasize in my clinics, is he's a front guy, okay? So as he's running out, he's also gaining as much information as he possibly can. So as he slides out into a spot, he doesn't need to yell. What one of my least favorite things to yell is, "What do we got?" Okay? He's going to tell you, oh no. Might have just lost everything here. He's going to be able to tell you guys what exactly he has. All right. Hold on one second. Okay, so we're back. Sorry about that. Little crash. So again, he's always looking downfield, and he's never going to have to ask. Well, he might have to ask. I don't want to say never. He's very rarely going to have to ask where all 5 of the other players are, because he's getting as much information as possible as he slides. So let's go through this entire slide. We'll go backwards right now. But look at his eyes are always up. His gun, that rotation, we're going to look at that. That's a really important key little aspect here of getting this dive down properly. I'm going to go ahead and assume that his eyes are up right there. We just can't see him. Again, eyes are up. His eyes are up. Always looking downfield. And then looking at that body momentum right there, that the mechanics of cocking that arm back to really throw himself back into that dive again right there. So very beautiful 2-part maneuver here by Ollie Ruffalo. Glad I was able to have a slight hand in teaching all that, I hope. Hopefully. All right, so we're going to get down to some of the ugly parts, okay? Now, I don't want to call this ugly. I think that these guys are doing a great job, and the fact that they're committing heavily to these dives is great. And this player here coming in, this looks like at a United Paintball League. Everything looks great. The small little error happens right here, and I'll see if you guys can see, and I'm going to go forward here and show you exactly what happens. But the small error is in where his bottle is, and not really twisting that arm as much as Ollie did. And what happens is the tank hits the ground, so everything looks great right here. Looking at right here, barrel tip is up. That's great. A barrel tip's up right there. But then what happens is the tank hits really hard, and he didn't extend that arm well enough, and luckily he's on turf. But you could see how that barrel tip kind of goes down into the dirt right there. The recovery is fine with this, and I'm going to show you actually Arturo Andrade do the exact same thing in dirt, but he recovers as well. So everything looks great on this dive, and the only small thing is that rotation of the wrist, what I pointed out that Ollie did so well. This rotation right here can be just a little bit more of a rotation upward here. And what it's going to do is it's going to save that bottle. Also, a lot more pressure, okay, on this forearm. So you just bend that wrist down a little bit, and it'll lock that bottle in. So as he's coming down, he just has that bottle kind of loose, and that tank hits, and then it propels that barrel that was up here straight down into the ground. So I'll just use this auto cocker because this is all I really have currently right here. That was as close as possible. So what we're doing is we're trying to get this thing locked in as tight as possible. But what happens is if it's a little loose and I go to hit, this is what happens right here. It just does one of these, okay? So as I come down, if this isn't locked in really tight, I want to hit here and not allow my bottle to flop up and down and point my barrel into the dirt. Probably should have had one of my forces there as a little description. But other than that, man, this dive looks really good, and I commend him for everything, and he really did do a good job. And everything looked good. If he was on grass or dirt, I would say there might have been a bit of a soil sample there that was left over. But let's get into okay. Very similar scenario, almost identical to what the last one we looked at. Everything is great. Dive looks nice. Everything looks good from here. The bottle just kind of, as he hits, maybe his elbow sticks a little bit, but that bottle pops up. Oops. And what happens is he loses control of his gun and rolls over his shoulder. So what's actually happening here is if you were to try this at home and you go ahead and dive on your elbows when they're not outstretched, you're going to put all that weight really on the center of your body, and you're going to roll over. And that's kind of what happened here, is he's kind of rolling over that front elbow because that elbow's not quite outstretched all the way. So what needs to happen is right here, he needs to really throw, we'll just go into the next slide here. What he needs to do is he needs to throw that front arm that's holding that gun needs to be extended further out. Okay, I don't know where to put this arrow exactly, but you really want to throw those elbows, okay? Because what's happening is all the weight is hitting now, or the majority of his weight is hitting right here, and his upper body is almost directly on top of that elbow. Okay, and what that's doing is it's driving all of that weight down, and he's rolling over the top of his arm a little bit, so that's why it's getting stuck slightly right here. And on top of that, he doesn't have good control with that pressure from his forearm or from his wrist onto his bottle, and that's why in this slide here he loses control of that bottle right there, forcing his gun to flop over, and you can see how his whole body is a little bit off balance. Another reason for that, he's got his gun in his right hand, he's running to his left, he's trying to come around this corner really tightly, and he's basically diving this direction and trying to swing his body in this direction here. And that's why you're seeing this little windmill scenario go here with his back of his arms. Again, not controlling that gun right here. It's completely flopped over his body, and it takes him a while. Oh, this one belongs up here. It takes him a while to get control. You know, I just hate to see that. That's just a very ugly dive. This is something that, you know, I would have tried to lateral slide into this if it were possible, but if not, you really need to get that gun, that bottle controlled onto that forearm. And as you dive, outstretch that arm a little bit. But what's happening is because he's diving with his right arm and then trying to slide over to his right, that's why you're seeing him come up here and then his body flail this direction while his momentum is going this direction, and his body is kind of flopping that direction. And that's what's causing a lot of the imbalance. And it's also the lack of pressure with his bottle. You see where his bottle is right here. This is kind of that area that we don't want that tank to be in. Okay, let me go. All right, let's take a look here. I'm gonna pull up these 3 photos of Arturo Andrade. All right, so let me move my face over here. Okay, Arturo, one of the best snake players in the game, incredibly fast. You know, his skill sets are impeccable, and he is this guy. This is him. One thing, this is a little tall right here with these feet. If I were to be nitpicky, and if he were to sit down and look at some of the photos, this is something that maybe goes, oh, you know what, my feet are a little high. But you see where the wrist is pointed down. The bottle is actually hitting first right here, but you're going to see in the next slide how his wrist has turned completely. So even though his bottle does hit, this is what I was pointing out with Ollie, as the wrist is spinning in this direction as that tank hits the ground. So this is like milliseconds of adjustments as the pressure hits. The outstretched arm, now he is playing on dirt. It's very sticky ground. But you can see the barrel slightly hits the ground, the dirt here, but he's got such a good control of his bottle that he's not going to lose control of that barrel. And while it does look like there's a little bit of turf that gets in there, or dirt that does get into the tip of the barrel, you can see on the third slide, he's actually already into his crawl, and that arm is back in here, and his gun is already protected at this point. So this is like a very highly critical position and very, very difficult maneuver to get all that down and still save his barrel. But it comes a lot with the pressure that he's putting between his forearm, from his wrist to his forearm to his bottle, okay? And that's why he's able to save this potential soil sample from actually happening, you know? And a lot of players, and I'm going to bring up a couple of other pro players out there that do the same thing or similar things, and you're going to see where where this bottle, the pressure between your wrist, forearm, and bottle are going to play a huge role in doing everything correctly, right? Oops. So let's jump into, let's see here. What do we got? Okay. So I'm going to open up these other bad slides here. This is just a myriad of bad slides before we get into the final JC, Justin Cornell. So this is just something that we're going to look at. Same scenario, okay? You just don't want your barrel to be, your gun and barrel to look like that as you're diving into something. Okay. Now, this is extremely, extremely difficult terrain to play in. Mud, it's probably sticky and it's slick. It depends on which portion you're hitting and where you're hitting. Also because your body's going to sink. So this is a tremendously difficult dive to really perfect, is getting into that thick mud, into the slick and whatnot. But I'm just going to point it out right here. You guys already know what I'm going to say, I'm sure. And that is, look at where his bottle is, okay, and where his forearm is. All right? So those two things should be connected. All right? We need to have those things on top of each other. Otherwise, what happens is you get that. You see that? Let's zoom right in there. That is a barrel full of duty. Right there. I don't know why I just drew that other line. But you can see how he doesn't have control of his bottle due to the fact that he dove in the mud, and that in turn pointed his barrel directly into the mud. All right. I'm going to show you the worst case scenario, and there it is right there. Soil sample, we've all seen this. Knocks your goggles off. I've seen Kyle Spickett do this. I've seen Blake Yarborough do this. I've seen Tyler Harmon break a barrel in half doing this. So look, it's not just a divisional thing. I've seen Scott Kemp do it. It's not just a divisional thing. So I'm not pointing out this guy specifically for that reason. I did point out the pro player here. But this is what could happen if you don't have control of your equipment properly, okay? I'm going to go into right here. This is just absolutely atrocious. All right. I hope that I didn't need to bring something up like this, but when you're diving, again, like I was pointing out with Ollie, your rule number one is that your wrist needs to be pointed at the ground. Okay? When you go to dive, I'm sorry, it goes like this. You can't dive directly on your gun. This is A, B, C, D, bad textbook. Absolutely bad here. This is pointed the wrong way. His barrel is directly into the ground there. Everything about this dive is very bad. And the reason is you got to protect your equipment, okay? If your gun goes down, then your body's down. Okay? That's what the bottom line is. If you take a huge soil sample and your equipment no longer works, it's just as bad as you getting injured. And I want you guys to know that your gun is an extension of your body, so you need to be comfortable with that. Under no circumstances should you ever enter into a dive or a slide with your palms facing down. Okay? Otherwise, you're just smashing your gun into the ground. I see this quite often, actually. Remember, you got to twist that wrist, all right? And that's a key takeaway. Now, let's go into, I just have one cool picture here of Justin Cornell here. Diving. Again, another perfect, great textbook lesson. One is, I'm going to go with green because he's doing such a good job. Eyes up. Okay, looking for his opponents. Elbow hits down. Tank locked directly into his forearm. Barrel tip pointed up. All right. Protecting his equipment, looking downfield, diving, and going to propel himself forward. And he's a great example to somebody who does this very, very, very well. Now let's go into a couple of crawling little bits. Now I've got a couple of Arturo. I'm just going to open all of these at the same time. When you're crawling, and remember I had that one small when I dissecting Ollie's slide to crawl maneuver. The one thing I would say is keep that pack down. This is something that I always tell people to do is keep that pack down. You can see as this player is crawling, you really got to be low, okay? For those of you guys who are watching this and you are the BKI members, I suggest you go and look at the combine drill, the snake combine drill. This is something that emphasizes the fact that you have to be low. And the reason you want to be low, they shouldn't have to say, it's because you don't want to get shot in the pack. When bad guys are shooting at you here, okay, and paintballs are coming in like this, you're just exposing yourself to enemy fire coming in over the top. All right. So I think this goes without saying. However, it is very important that you guys look at this, right? If nobody's telling you guys that your pack is above, is too high, then you're never going to know. If you don't look at it, you're never going to know. Again, same thing here. You want to really get that, your hips and your pelvis on the ground. Now here's Arturo Andrade crawling. Now this was actually at the Las Vegas Open, and coming around this corner, it was very, very, very tight. And a lot of teams could be able to shoot down on top of you. So you had to be as low as possible. But even, I know Arturo's a small guy, but something you guys want to practice is crawling. Absolutely crawling. See how his barrel tip is kept out of the dirt right there. Always kept out of the dirt, keeping that gun clean. Well, it's pretty dirty here, but keeping that barrel tip out of the ground, out of the dirt. He grabs one hand forward, pulls like this, elbow into the ground, and then back, okay? So he's doing that little motion. He's also kicking those feet a little bit. So you can see how the mechanics work here. You're going front hand out to grab yourself some turf, and then you propel yourself forward with that front arm, and then you do that same motion over again. So again, just to recap on a couple of things, I'm going to go back to Ollie. Excuse me, sorry about that. I'm going to go back to Ollie here, and where is he? And really show a couple of things. And the main takeaway that I have illustrated and reiterated was where your tank and your forearm are. Okay, I think that you have control with the wrist to your putting pressure there on your bottle to your forearm and twisting that wrist, and so your palm, or sorry, your palm is facing up, your forearm is facing down, and that momentum that you move yourself forward and back. The 3 points of contact here as you guys slide in. Whoops. All right, as you guys are coming into a lateral slide, okay, you have 1, 2, 3 points of contact here, and then you twist that body, that momentum. But see how that tank is locked into my forearm right here? Tank is locked into my forearm. You're gonna see that that being a very common common theme, and that is what I wanted to show you guys. There it is again. That tank's locked into that forearm, and he has complete control.